They said they wanted me there, swore up and down that this year would be different, that if I came, it would be the greatest gift of all, a chance for us to be together again, just like we used to be. So I did. I packed my old pie dish, the one that's outlasted marriages, winters, and more Thanksgivings than I can count. I folded my cardigan, soft and neat, still holding a trace of cinnamon from the night before. I even tucked in a jar of homemade cranberry jam, just in case their store-bought one didn't taste like family. And then I waited. Gate 3A, Minneapolis St. Paul. The loudspeaker crackled, luggage wheels hummed against the tile, and the arrivals gate turned into a flood of reunion. Flowers, balloons, arms outstretched. Some people laughed, some cried. Every single one of them was being claimed. Everyone but me. The flight had landed 42 minutes ago. I'd checked twice. The board still said arrived. My phone still showed the last message. We'll be there. The kids can't wait to see you. Followed by a heart emoji that just hours ago had meant everything. I'd even sent one back. Flight lands at 3:10. Can't wait to hug everyone. That message sat there, delivered. Never read. I didn't sit. Sitting felt like surrender, like confirming what my bones already knew. So I stood there, coat folded over my arm, pretending to look calm while my heart kept scanning the crowd for a face that wasn't coming. Then my phone buzzed. Not a call, not a text, a notification, social media. And before I could stop myself, I opened it. Because sometimes, that's where family remembers you exist. There they were, smiling faces around a golden turkey, candles glowing, glasses raised, a house full of warmth. A table too small for one more chair. The caption read, "Full house, full hearts. Happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours." For a long moment, I just stared at the picture, the laughter, the light, the pie that wasn't mine. And then it sank in. Not anger, not shock, just the slow, cold knowing that I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been replaced. I didn't cry. Not then. I lifted my suitcase handle, slipped my coat over my shoulders, and walked out. Past the taxis, past the noise, until all the belonging in that building faded into November silence. 3 days before my flight, the phone rang while I was wiping down the kitchen counter. Afternoon light was spilling through the window, catching the steam from the kettle. I almost didn't pick up. My son doesn't usually call unless there's a reason. "Mom," he said when I answered, voice lighter than usual, almost cheerful. "The kids were asking about you. It wouldn't feel right without you this year." For a second, I just stood there, hands still on the dish towel. Those words, "It wouldn't feel right without you," they did something to me. It's been years since anyone said that and meant it. Most times when they called, it was about something practical, a recipe, a bill, a question about insurance. Never just, "We miss you." I tried to sound casual. "Are you sure? I don't want to be in the way." He chuckled. "In the way? Mom, please. The kids are excited. Just get your ticket. We'll take care of everything else." After we hung up, I didn't move right away. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock. I just stood there, the phone still warm in my hand, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Wanted. Not needed, not useful, but wanted. That night, I sat at the computer and looked up flights. The cheapest one left on Thanksgiving morning. I hesitated, then booked it anyway. I even paid the extra $12 for an aisle seat with more legroom. A small luxury, but it felt good to choose something for myself. When the confirmation email came through, I smiled. Not a big, foolish grin. Just that small, private kind that comes when you let yourself believe in something again. The next day, I went into town. I bought a navy cardigan. Soft wool, simple. Something that made me feel a little more like myself. I picked up gifts for the kids, too. A small puzzle for Lucas, a book for Sophie, a box of chocolates for their mom. I wrapped them neatly and tied each with a bit of ribbon. Nothing fancy, but thoughtful. At home, I set my suitcase on the bed and started to pack early. Socks first, then the cardigan, then the pie dish wrapped in a kitchen towel so it wouldn't crack. I even tucked in a jar of my homemade cranberry jam. It's silly, but it made me feel part of something again, like I was preparing for more than just a trip. As I zipped up the suitcase, I realized I was humming. It startled me. I couldn't remember the last time I'd done that. That night, as I turned off the lights, I stood by the window for a moment looking out at the street. The neighbors' houses were already lit with Thanksgiving decorations, warm windows, laughter floating out from behind the glass. I pictured my own family's house the same way. I could almost hear the door opening, the sound of footsteps, someone saying, "She's here," and meaning it. Maybe I should have known better. But that night, I let myself believe it. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was waiting for me. And that small, fragile hope, it was enough to make the world feel bright again. When the plane landed, I felt that small rush, the one you get when you think something good is about to happen. I smoothed my skirt, brushed the crumbs off my lap, and slipped back into my good shoes, the black ones with the little heel. I'd chosen them on purpose. I wanted to look decent, like someone worth being picked up. The aisle was crowded with people reaching for bags, laughing, calling out to each other. I stayed in my seat a little longer, giving myself a moment to breathe, to feel steady. I told myself, they're probably already waiting outside the gate. When I finally stepped off the plane, the terminal was alive with noise, announcements echoing, wheels from suitcases rattling on the floor, people holding flowers, balloons, handmade signs that said, "Welcome home," or "We missed you." There was so much warmth around me. People hugging, laughing, crying. It almost made me forget how long it had been since I'd had a welcome like that. I moved to the side, just past Gate 3A, where families usually wait. I stood under the big arrivals sign, my suitcase by my side, my coat folded neatly over my arm. I didn't want to sit down. Sitting would make it look like I'd been waiting too long. The flight had landed 42 minutes ago. I checked my phone again. No missed calls. No new messages. Just the old text. "We'll be there. Kids can't wait to see you," with that little red heart at the end. I scrolled up to my reply. Flight lands at 3:10. Can't wait to hug everyone. Still marked as delivered, never read. I told myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe they were running late. Maybe they'd gotten caught in traffic. Maybe the kids were being wild in the back seat and she couldn't text back. I kept my coat folded because it was warm inside. I kept standing because once I sat, it would mean admitting something I wasn't ready to face. Time passed in the quiet way it does when you're trying not to notice it. I looked around. People kept arriving. More hugs, more tears, more laughter, and one by one, everyone was claimed. Everyone except me. The terminal emptied. The janitor came by, pushing his cart. The loudspeaker switched to another flight. I checked the time again, 3:54, then 4:12, then 4:37. I started making excuses out loud just to hear my own voice. Maybe they couldn't find parking. Maybe they went to the wrong terminal. Maybe something came up. But the longer I stood there, the quieter those maybes got. Then my phone buzzed. My heart jumped, finally. A text, a call, something. But it wasn't either. Just a social media notification. I hesitated, then opened it. And there it was, a picture. The whole family, sitting around a table covered with food and candles. The turkey carved. The mashed potatoes in the blue dish I'd given them years ago. My son in the navy sweater I'd mailed last Christmas. His wife smiling. The kids grinning, cheeks red from laughter. And on the table, a pie. Not mine. The caption said, "Full house, full hearts. Happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours." I stared at it until the edges of the photo blurred. I zoomed in once, twice, as if maybe, somehow, I'd missed something. A shadow of my pie dish, a chair left empty, a sign that I was meant to be there. But there wasn't. There was no space for me at that table. That's when it hit me, quietly, not like a punch, but like cold water running down my back. They weren't coming. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just folded my coat over my arm, gripped the suitcase handle, and started walking. Past the taxis, past the shuttle signs, past families reuniting under the fluorescent lights. I walked until the sounds of laughter and luggage wheels faded behind me. The glass doors opened and the cold air rushed in, sharp, honest, real. For the first time all day, I felt something true. It wasn't that they forgot me. They just didn't think I'd notice. I didn't have a plan after I walked out of the airport. I just knew I couldn't stand there any longer, pretending to wait for someone who wasn't coming. The air outside hit sharp and cold. My breath turned to fog as I stepped onto the sidewalk. The noise of the terminal faded behind me, replaced by the sound of traffic, the hum of engines, a plane roaring somewhere overhead. I held my coat tighter and started walking. At first, I told myself I'd find a cab. But the line was long, and everyone seemed to know exactly where they were going. I didn't. So I kept walking, past the taxis, past the shuttle signs, past the car rental lots. My suitcase wheels rattled against the pavement, clicking every few steps like a metronome keeping time. I didn't feel angry, just hollow, tired in a way that went deeper than my bones, the kind of tired that comes from holding on to hope longer than you should. About half a mile down, I saw it. A squat little building with a faded red roof and a neon sign that flickered weakly in the cold air. Doris's Diner. The O buzzed, dimming in and out like a broken heartbeat. Through the windows, I could see warm light and a few people hunched over plates. It wasn't much, but it was something. The bell above the door jingled when I stepped inside. The warmth hit me right away. Greasy, comforting, heavy with the smell of coffee and butter. The floor tiles were cracked, the booths covered in worn red vinyl. A radio played softly somewhere behind the counter. A waitress looked up from pouring coffee and smiled. Her name tag read Shannon. "Happy Thanksgiving, hun," she said, cheerful in that tired, practiced way people use when they've worked too many holidays. "Same to you," I managed. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Kitchen's slow today," she said as she handed me a menu. "But we've got turkey, mashed potatoes, and pie. Tea, too, if you're not in a coffee mood." "Pie sounds good," I said. "What kind? Pumpkin, pecan, or key lime?" I hesitated. "Pumpkin and tea, please." "You got it, hun," she said, and walked off toward the counter. I slid into the booth nearest the window. The seat was warm from the vent below. I placed my coat beside me and set my suitcase next to the table, its wheels smudged with road dust. Outside, the sky had turned that dull gray color that comes before night fully settles. Inside, everything glowed. Yellow light bouncing off chrome, steam rising from mugs, the faint clatter of plates from the kitchen. For the first time that day, I felt still. Not good, not bad, just still. When Shannon brought the pie, it was on a chipped white plate, the crust golden, a dollop of whipped cream melting slightly to the side. The tea came in a thick mug, the kind that feels solid in your hand. "Here you go," she said, "fresh out of the oven." "Thank you," I said quietly. The first bite was warm, the spices rich and familiar. The pumpkin filling was smooth, not too sweet. I chewed slowly, letting the taste sit. Then I took another bite. It was the best piece of pie I'd had in years, maybe because, for once, I hadn't baked it for anyone else. I stared out the window while I ate. Cars passed, headlights flashing against the glass. A man in a UPS jacket sat 2 booths over, eating a turkey sandwich in silence. An older couple shared a plate of fries, not saying much, but sitting close enough to touch shoulders. My phone buzzed once on the table. I didn't flip it over. I didn't want to see whatever it was. Apology, excuse, or silence. None of it mattered anymore. I finished the pie slowly, sipping my tea between bites. The heat spread through my fingers, easing something inside me I hadn't even realized was clenched. When Shannon came back with the check, she smiled again. "Want another slice to go?" I looked at her kind, tired face, and after a moment, I nodded. "Yes, for later," she grinned. "Best decision you'll make all day." I smiled back, not because it was funny, but because she was right. A few minutes later, she brought a small white paper bag, folded neatly at the top. I tucked a few bills under the check, slid into my coat, and stood up. Outside, the sky had deepened to blue-black. The neon sign above the door buzzed and hummed, the pink light reflecting on the wet pavement. I stood there for a second, holding the paper bag in one hand and my suitcase in the other, the cold air wrapping around me like something honest. The bag was warm against my palm. I could smell the cinnamon through the paper. I didn't know where I was going next. No hotel booked. No one waiting. But for the first time all day, that thought didn't scare me. I walked down the sidewalk, passing a row of parked cars. Behind me, the diner door jingled again. Someone else coming in from the cold. I didn't look back. The pie in my hand smelled like cinnamon and freedom. I didn't call a cab. I just walked. Not because I had anywhere in mind, but because standing still felt worse. The air outside the diner was sharp enough to make my eyes water. The neon from Doris's diner flickered behind me until it became a pink blur in the dark. Cars passed now and then, their headlights sweeping across the wet asphalt. Each step echoed. The dull roll of suitcase wheels over uneven pavement, the steady rhythm of shoes hitting concrete. It was the only sound I could control. I didn't think about the photo. Or maybe I did, just not in full. Every time it flickered in my mind, I pushed it away. The table, the laughter, the pie that wasn't mine. It all pressed against my ribs like something I couldn't quite swallow. About 15 minutes later, I saw the sign. Valley Inn. The letters buzzed faintly, half lit, half dead. Below it, another smaller sign blinked vacancy in a dull red glow. The parking lot was mostly empty, slick with thin puddles from earlier rain. A single soda can rolled lazily in the wind, bumping against a tire stop. I stood there a moment, watching the sign flicker. My hands were stiff from the cold. I pulled my coat tighter and started up the short walkway to the office. The door chimed when I opened it. Inside, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee, the kind that sits too long on a hot plate. A television on the counter behind the desk played a football game with the sound turned down low. The man at the desk didn't look up right away. He was middle-aged with thinning hair and a look of permanent boredom. His name tag said Carl Benson. He finally met my eyes. Need a room? Yes, just for one night. He nodded like it was nothing new. Single? Yes. ID and card. His voice was flat, efficient, not unkind, just tired. I slid the card across the counter. While he typed, I watched the TV behind him. Players ran across the field in silence. A few people in the stands waved their arms, frozen mid-motion. He slid a key toward me, an actual key, not a card, attached to a faded plastic tag, room 114. Down that way, he said, pointing vaguely. End of the row. Heater works mostly. Thank you, I said. He gave a single nod and turned back to the game. The hallway smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and something older underneath. Dust, maybe, or memories. A vending machine hummed by the exit, its glass front reflecting the flicker of the outside lights. I passed 2 closed doors before reaching 114. The paint on the number was chipped, the key stiff in the lock. When the door opened, a soft rush of stale air met me. The room was exactly what I expected. Maybe worse, maybe better. A bed with a patterned brown spread, 2 lamps with shades that didn't match, a TV older than my youngest grandchild. But it was clean, and it was quiet. I closed the door behind me and turned the lock until it clicked. The sound felt final. Not lonely, not even sad. Just final. I put my suitcase near the wall and sat on the edge of the bed. The springs groaned a little. I kicked off my shoes and rubbed my feet through my socks. They were sore, but the kind of sore that meant I was done for the day. The heater under the window rattled when I turned the dial. After a moment, it began to hum, blowing out air that smelled faintly metallic. I wrapped my coat around my shoulders until it warmed up. I looked around. The walls had that faint yellow tint time leaves behind. The wallpaper had once had a floral pattern. Now it was mostly ghosts of flowers. There was a desk pushed against the far wall, a cheap plastic chair, and a small notepad printed with the motel's logo, Valley Inn, Rest Easy. I laughed softly under my breath. Rest easy, sure. On the nightstand sat a landline phone, the kind that probably hadn't rung in years. Next to it was a little lamp with a chain pull. I turned it on. The light was weak but warm. For a while, I didn't move. I just sat there staring at the lamp's glow on the wall. My hands were still, folded in my lap. The room buzzed with that kind of silence that only comes when you've stopped pretending. Then I remembered the paper bag. It was sitting on the desk where I'd set it down when I came in. I walked over, unrolled the top, and pulled out the second slice of pie. The crust had softened a bit, and the whipped cream was gone, but it still smelled like cinnamon and nutmeg. I didn't bother with a plate. I just sat on the edge of the bed again and ate it straight from the wrapper, slowly, letting each bite fill the quiet. It wasn't about the taste. It was about the fact that I didn't owe it to anyone. I didn't bake it, didn't serve it, didn't wait for someone else to take the first slice. When the last bite was gone, I set the empty wrapper on the nightstand and stared at it. That's when my phone buzzed. Once. Then again. Then again. I looked at it for a long time before I picked it up. 3 missed calls from Daniel, 2 from Clara, and 1 unread text. "Mom, where are you?" "No, I'm sorry. No, we forgot. Just confusion." Like I was the one who'd gone missing. I watched the screen until it dimmed and went black. Then I flipped it over so the light couldn't find me again. For a minute, I thought about calling back, saying something simple like, "I'm fine," or "Don't worry." But the words felt heavy, like they belonged to the woman who waited at gate 3A, not the one sitting here now. I left the phone face down on the table. I reached for the notepad instead. The paper was thin, almost translucent, but smooth under my hand. The pen had the motel's name printed in fading blue letters. I clicked it once and wrote slowly, carefully, each word deliberate. "I am not spare. I am not extra. I am not a side dish at someone else's table." The pen skipped a little on the last line. I went back and traced over it again until the ink bled slightly into the page. The paper wrinkled where my hand had pressed too long. When I was done, I sat back and looked at it. 3 lines. Nothing dramatic, just truth. For a long while, I did nothing. The heater hummed. The walls creaked now and then. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed and someone laughed. The sound brief, distant, ordinary. I realized, sitting there in that worn motel chair, that I wasn't angry. Not really. Anger would have meant I still wanted something from them. What I felt was quieter, something closer to understanding. They hadn't left me out to hurt me. They'd left me out because it was easier, because they'd built a life where I no longer fit neatly. And maybe that was on me, too, for shrinking myself small enough to fit whenever they needed me to. The truth settled slow and clean, like snow that doesn't melt right away. I turned off the lamp. The room went soft and shadowed, the orange glow from the heater painting faint lines across the carpet. I lay back on the bed, still in my clothes, my coat folded across my stomach like a blanket. The ceiling had a crack that ran from one corner to the other. I traced it with my eyes until it disappeared into the dark. I thought of the message again. "Mom, where are you?" And for the first time, I realized I could answer it honestly, even if I never sent it. "I'm right here, exactly where you left me. And finally, that's okay." The heater clicked, the sound steady, almost soothing. My eyes felt heavy, but I wasn't sad, just awake in a different kind of way. I breathed in the smell of cinnamon that still lingered faintly in the air, and it made me smile just a little. It wasn't peace exactly, not yet, but it was truth. And for now, that was enough. Morning came slow, the kind of gray, quiet morning where the world seems to hold its breath before deciding what kind of day it wants to be. The light crept in through the thin motel curtains, soft and tired. I could hear the low hum of traffic on the highway, and somewhere far off, the sound of a delivery truck's backup alarm beeping in the distance. For a moment, I just lay there. The sheets smelled faintly of detergent and heat from the old radiator. My body ached, but not from the bed, from the day before, from the waiting, from all the holding in. When I finally sat up, the heater clicked off, leaving the room in a silence that felt honest. I looked around at the empty coffee packet on the desk, the half-folded coat, the note I'd written the night before. The words stared back at me, calm and certain. "I am not spare. I am not extra. I am not a side dish at someone else's table." I slipped the paper into my purse. Not to keep it safe, just to remind myself that it existed. I checked my phone. A few new messages. From Daniel, "We're worried. Please call." From Clara, "Mom, the kids want to say hi. Let's talk when you can." I read them once and set the phone down. There wasn't anger in me anymore, just distance. The kind that comes when you've stopped waiting for someone to understand. After a quick shower and a lukewarm cup of motel coffee, I packed my bag. The second slice of pie was gone, but the scent still lingered faintly in the room. Cinnamon, nutmeg, something warm. At the front desk, Carl Benson was still there, reading a newspaper. He looked up as I handed over the key. "Sleep all right?" he asked. "I did," I said. And I meant it. He nodded once, went back to his paper. Outside, the air had softened. The sharp cold from the night before had turned into a kind of crisp calm. I walked down the street until I reached a small strip mall. A laundromat, a nail salon, a post office wedged between them. The door chimed when I stepped inside. The place smelled faintly of paper and ink. Behind the counter stood a man in his 40s, wearing wireframe glasses and a patient smile. His name tag read Omar Patel. "Morning," he said. "How can I help you today?" "I just need some stationery," I said. "And a stamp." He pointed to a small stand near the counter. "Right there, ma'am. Take your pick. The blue ones are heavier paper. Good for letters." "Thank you." I picked out a single sheet, cream-colored, with a matching envelope. I paid for them, then asked, "Would it be all right if I wrote it here?" "Of course," Omar said, gesturing toward a small writing counter near the window. "Take your time." I sat down, set my bag beside me, and smoothed out the paper. For a moment, I didn't know where to start. It had been years since I'd written a real letter. Not an email, not a text, but something you hold, something that travels miles before it's opened. Then I thought of Nora, my granddaughter from Daniel's first marriage, the only one who still called on Sundays, the only one who remembered my birthday without Facebook reminding her, the one who always said, "Grandma, tell me about when you were my age," like it mattered. The pen felt steady in my hand. "Dear Nora, I hope you're doing well, sweetheart. I'm writing from Minnesota, though not from where I expected to be. I flew out here for Thanksgiving. I thought I'd spend it with your dad and the family, but plans have a way of changing when you least expect it. Yesterday, I waited at the airport for a while. Then I had some pie at a little diner called Doris's, the best I've had in years. After that, I stayed at a small place called Valley Inn, room 114. Not fancy, but warm enough. Don't worry, I'm perfectly fine. Better than fine, actually. Sometimes the world reminds you where you stand by showing you where you don't belong. I wanted to thank you for always thinking of me, for the calls, for remembering my birthday, for asking about my garden. It means more than you can imagine. You've always had a kind heart, and you've always seen me. That's a rare gift. I think this trip was meant to happen, even if not the way I planned. I flew across the country for a table I was never meant to sit at, and found space to remember who I am. Be well, my dear girl. And don't forget to live in a way that feels true to you, not just comfortable for everyone else. With love, Grandma. When I finished, I read it once, then folded the page carefully and slipped it into the envelope. I sealed it and wrote her name in my neatest handwriting. Miss Nora Hale, Seattle. Washington Omar looked up as I brought it to the counter. "All set?" "Yes," I said, handing him the envelope and a stamp. He weighed it gently, then smiled. "It'll get there in a few days." "I'm in no rush," I said. "It's worth the wait." He nodded, placed the envelope in the outgoing bin. I watched it slip down into the stack, disappearing beneath a pile of other letters headed who knows where. For a second, I felt something loosen inside me, a small release, quiet but real. When I stepped outside, the sun had finally broken through the clouds. Light spilled across the parking lot, glinting off the windows of parked cars. I zipped my coat, adjusted the strap of my bag, and started walking. No one was waiting. No one was calling me back. But for the first time in a long time, that didn't feel like a loss. It felt like room. The kind you make when you finally stop trying to fit where you don't belong. Airports look different when you're not waiting for anyone. They feel quieter even when they aren't. I sat near the big window by gate 12, my suitcase tucked neatly beside me. Outside, planes rolled slowly along the wet tarmac, their engines humming like a faraway storm. The glass was cold under my fingers. I hadn't planned to fly home this soon, but then again, I hadn't planned any of it. Across from me, a little girl tugged on her grandmother's hand. Maybe 6 or 7 years old, blonde braids tied with pink ribbons. They were sharing a sandwich, the child swinging her legs, chattering about something only kids find important. The older woman laughed, brushed crumbs from her lap, and leaned down to whisper something that made the girl giggle louder. I watched them longer than I should have. Not out of envy, not anymore, but out of recognition. I knew what it felt like to have a hand that small trust yours completely. I'd had that once. I deserved that too, I thought. Maybe not forever, but once. A soft announcement came through the speaker. My flight boarding soon. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small notepad I'd taken from the Valley Inn, the one that said "Rest easy." On the top page, I wrote just 2 words, "Going home." Then I smiled, tore it out, folded it once, and slipped it into the pocket of my coat. When the boarding call came, I stood and joined the small line forming at the gate. No one was rushing. Everyone looked half tired, half ready. The air smelled faintly of coffee and jet fuel. A young flight attendant greeted me with that professional brightness you only get from people who've said, "Welcome aboard" 600 times in one day. "Good morning," she said, scanning my ticket. "Heading home or leaving it?" Her words caught me a little off guard. She meant it casually, small talk, but it landed deeper than she knew. I looked at her, then at the window where another plane lifted off, slicing through low clouds. "Both," I said softly. "In a way." She smiled, not understanding, and waved me through. The plane wasn't full. I took a window seat and buckled in, setting my small bag under the seat in front of me. The hum of the engines filled the cabin. A man across the aisle was reading a newspaper. A woman behind me was already asleep. As we taxied down the runway, I glanced out at the city below. Gray rooftops, the thin silver of the river, cars threading their way through morning traffic. Somewhere in that sprawl, my son's house stood with its full table and half-truths. And somewhere else, miles away, a letter was on its way to Seattle, carrying the words I meant to say. When the plane lifted, the world below folded into clouds. I leaned my head against the window and let the light hit my face. I wasn't thinking about what they might say when they realized I hadn't come back, or when they'd read the message I never sent. I wasn't thinking about the empty chair that might sit at next year's table. I was thinking about pie and cinnamon and a diner with flickering lights where someone had called me Hun without knowing my story. I was thinking about Nora, who would open that envelope and maybe understand before anyone else did. And I was thinking about myself, not as a mother or a widow or a guest someone forgot to pick up, but just me. The engines grew louder, steady, and sure. I closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, going home didn't mean arriving anywhere. It meant carrying myself there. The house was still exactly as I'd left it. The porch light humming faintly, the old doormat curled at the corners, the faint scent of cedar and lavender drifting from somewhere inside. I unlocked the door, stepped in, and paused. Silence. Not the kind that waits for company. The kind that finally belongs to you. I set my suitcase down by the stairs and hung my coat on the same hook I'd used for 40 years. The radiator kicked on with a low, familiar groan. Warm air drifted through the hall. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like a guest anywhere. The kitchen smelled like it always did. Old wood, tea leaves, a hint of lemon polish. My teapot was still on the stove, the kind with the tiny chip on the spout. I filled it halfway, not because I needed the tea, but because ritual has a way of reminding you who you are. While it boiled, I walked to the drawer by the fridge. That drawer. The one labeled in my late husband's neat handwriting, Files. It was old, the brass handle worn smooth from years of use. I pulled it open, the wood sticking slightly before giving way with a soft creak. Inside were the manila folders, each labeled in black pen, organized and quiet, like the history of a life lived for others. Daniel, Nora, legal, taxes. My hands hesitated, then reached for Daniel's. The folder was thick, edges frayed from being handled too many times. I sat down at the kitchen table, turned on the small lamp, and began to leaf through it. Receipts, bank transfers, copies of checks, even a few handwritten notes from years ago. Car insurance, tuition déposite, mortgage payment assistance. A repair invoice for the old sedan they used to drive. My handwriting at the bottom. Paid, Mom. A printout of a wire transfer labeled bridge loan. I had forgotten most of these. One after another, the papers told the story I hadn't said out loud, that I'd been patching the holes in my son's life quietly, automatically, the way mothers do when no one else will. It wasn't anger I felt, just a hollow sort of clarity. I turned a few more pages. A note in Clara's handwriting from years back. We'll pay you back after the bonus hits. It never did. The teapot whistled. I poured myself a cup and sat back down, watching the steam curl into the air. Next, I reached for the other folder, the thinner one, marked Nora. It opened easily, almost tenderly. Inside, a graduation photo, edges bent from handling. A birthday card that read, "Love you always, Grandma." A printed email. "Thank you for helping me with my nursing school fees. I promise I'll make you proud." A recipe card she'd copied from me when she was 10. Apple crisp, written in bright purple ink, hearts dotting every I. That folder was light in weight but heavy in meaning. Everything inside it had been given back. Love for love, care for care. No IOUs, no apologies. Just presence. I sat there for a long while, the two folders side by side, one thick, one thin. One full of debts never mentioned, the other full of affection freely returned. The clock above the stove ticked steadily. The house didn't feel empty anymore, just honest. I reached for my notepad, the same one I'd brought from the motel. The page was blank, waiting. I didn't write a letter, not this time. I wrote a plan, line by line, in clear, even handwriting. Not a plea for anyone to see me, not a demand to be thanked. Just a plan for what would happen next, what I would keep, what I would protect, and what I would finally stop giving away. Plan, review accounts at the bank, call Mr. Adler, change the will, establish a trust, Nora only, keep the house, stop explaining. When I set the pen down, I looked at what I'd written. It didn't feel harsh, it felt earned. Outside, wind brushed against the kitchen window. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once and went quiet. I sipped my tea, now just warm enough to hold. This wasn't a breakdown. It was bookkeeping, of life, of love, of everything that had gone uncounted. I gathered the folders, stacked them neatly, and slid them back into the drawer. The brass handle clicked shut with a small, final sound. Then I stood there for a long moment, one hand resting on the drawer, feeling the weight of everything inside and the lightness of what I'd finally decided to carry out. The house was quiet, the way it used to be when my husband was still alive, when silence meant peace, not absence. I turned off the lamp, let the steam from my tea fade into the dark, and whispered to no one in particular, "It's time." Morning light spilled through the kitchen window, pale and unhurried. The steam from my tea curled slowly above the mug, drifting toward the faded curtains. I hadn't planned to go out that day, but I woke with a kind of quiet certainty, the kind that tells you there's something left unfinished, and it's time to stop leaving it that way. For years, I'd told myself that helping Daniel wasn't a burden, that it was love, duty, what mothers do. But love isn't supposed to drain you until you forget where your edges are. And that's exactly what had happened. Piece by piece, check by check, a slow kind of disappearing I hadn't noticed until there was nothing left to give. I rinsed the mug, set it in the sink, and reached for my coat. Outside, frost had dusted the garden fence, thin, glinting white under the sun. The air bit at my cheeks as I stepped off the porch, the cold grounding me more than coffee ever could. I didn't drive. I wanted to walk. I needed to feel each step, to remind myself I was still capable of moving forward, on my own terms. The bank sat on the corner of Maple and Fifth, glass doors shining against the morning light. I paused before going in, catching my reflection, coat buttoned, hair brushed, face calm. Not angry, not defeated, just clear. Inside, it smelled faintly of copier ink and coffee, the hum of printers, the muffled clicks of keyboards, the polite tone of quiet transactions. A young teller looked up from the counter. Tidy bun, neat blazer, name tag that read, Jillian Price. "Good morning," she said brightly. "How can I help you today?" "I'd like to review my accounts," I said. "All of them." "Of course," she smiled. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I met her eyes. "But I'm ready to wait." She hesitated, glanced toward the small offices along the back wall. "Actually, I can help you myself, Mrs. Langford. Right this way." Her office was glass-walled, tidy. A desk, 2 chairs, a photo of a dog taped to the monitor. She motioned for me to sit. "So, what are we looking at today?" "I want to stop all automatic transfers," I said, resting my hands on the desk. "All of them. Any recurring payments to family, I want them gone." Her hand froze mid-air, pen hovering over her notepad. "All of them?" "Yes," I said, then softer. "All of them." She nodded once, composed herself, and turned to the computer. The keys clicked steadily as she scrolled through the list. I watched the reflection flicker across her glasses. Dates, numbers, familiar names. "There are several here," she said after a moment. "A monthly transfer to Daniel Langford, a tuition payment, car insurance, and some donations to charity. Would you like to keep the donations?" "Yes." "The charities stay? And the rest? Stop them. Today." The sound of typing filled the space again, precise, efficient. Then she turned slightly toward me. "There's also a power of attorney on file," she said carefully. "Your son, Daniel, is listed as the authorized party on your accounts. Do you still want that in place?" I looked past her shoulder, at the frost melting along the window edge, then back at her. "No. Revoke it." Something in her expression shifted, the faintest flicker of understanding. She didn't question it. She just nodded, opened a drawer, and pulled out a new form. "This will remove his authorization. You'll have full control again. Full control." The words landed heavier than I expected. She slid the paper across the desk along with a pen. The ink was blue, sharp against the cream page. "Initial here," she said softly, "and sign at the bottom." My hand hovered for a second, then steadied. The pen moved slowly, not shaking, not rushed. Each loop of my signature deliberate. When I finished, I set the pen down, exhaled, and felt the faint tremor leave my shoulders. Jillian gathered the documents, placed them neatly in a folder, and looked at me. "It's done," she said simply. "Would you like copies for your records?" "Yes, please." While she printed them, I looked around the room. The plant by the window, the small clock ticking faintly, the faint scent of her hand lotion in the air. Normal things. Ordinary things. And yet for me, this was the most extraordinary morning I'd had in years. She handed me the folder. "If you'd like, we can schedule a review next month. Just to make sure everything's how you want it." I smiled. "It already is." The doors hissed open as I stepped outside. The cold met me again, sharper now, but clean. For a moment, I just stood there on the sidewalk, the sunlight hitting the glass behind me. People brushing past, each wrapped up in their own business. My purse felt lighter, though nothing inside had changed. Across the street, the bakery had just opened. The smell of warm bread drifted out as I crossed over. Inside, a woman was pulling rolls from the oven. "Morning," she said. "What'll it be?" "One roll," I said. "Something fresh." She wrapped it in brown paper, still warm to the touch. As I paid, she smiled. "That's the best one of the batch." I smiled back. "I'll take your word for it." Outside, I tore off a small piece and tasted it as I walked. The crust was crisp, the center soft, buttery, plain, perfect. The warmth spread through my hands, then deeper, somewhere past where the cold could reach. I passed the park where children were playing, their voices bright against the winter air. I passed the cafe where I used to sit with Daniel and his father on Saturday mornings, back when life was simpler, back when I thought being generous meant being loved. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of yeast and snow and something else. Possibility, maybe. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking toward anyone. I wasn't walking away either. I was just walking, light, steady, whole. And as I turned onto my street, I realized something simple and certain. Freedom doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it comes with the soft sound of your own footsteps and the warmth of a loaf of bread cooling in your hands. The morning air smelled faintly of rain when I stepped out of the house. The street was still wet, shining under a pale sun. The world was busy again. Delivery trucks groaning past, people in coats walking fast, a couple arguing quietly at the bus stop. But I wasn't rushing. I'd already spent too many years moving fast for other people. The law office sat downtown, tucked between a florist and an old watch repair shop. The brass letters on the glass door still read Adler and Finch, attorneys at law, the same as they had for decades. Inside, it was warm, quiet, and smelled like paper, furniture polish, and time. The receptionist, a woman I half remembered, smiled as I walked in. "Good morning, Mrs. Langford. Mr. Adler's expecting you." I nodded, smoothing my coat. "Thank you." The carpet hushed my footsteps down the narrow hall. Through the frosted glass, I could see him. Henry Adler, my lawyer since the days when my husband was still alive. He was sitting behind his desk, the same heavy oak piece that must have seen 100 families decide what to do with their lives. He stood when I entered, that small, courteous gesture that said he hadn't changed. "Marjorie," he said warmly. "Well, this is a surprise. It's been too long." "It has," I said, taking his hand. "You look exactly the same." "Liar," he chuckled, motioning me toward the chair. "Sit. How are you?" "I'm fine." Better than I've been in a while. He nodded, settling into his own chair. That's good to hear. Now tell me, what brings you in today? I assume this isn't about taxes. No. I folded my hands on my lap. It's about the will. That word, will, seemed to hang between us, heavy but not frightening. He adjusted his glasses. All right, what kind of changes are we making? I want to revise everything, I said. There'll be a trust, just one, for Nora Hale. He blinked once. Your granddaughter from Daniel's first marriage? Yes. No provisions for Daniel? None. He studied me, not unkindly, just carefully. That's a significant change. I know. And you're certain? Yes. I met his gaze, my voice steady. She's the only one who still sees me as a person, not a purse. For a moment, Henry said nothing. Then he nodded slowly, as if something in my tone explained everything he didn't need to ask. Then let's make sure this is done right. He opened a file, the paper inside crackling softly. We'll revoke the existing will and create a living trust. You want it restricted? Gradual access, I said. Disbursements yearly. Full access at 30. He nodded, writing in his neat square hand. And if anyone contests it, then everything goes to charity. Every last cent. His pen stopped. That's a bold clause. Then it's the right one. He gave a small smile. You've always known your mind, Marjorie. I respect that. I didn't, not for a long time, I said quietly. But I do now. He rose, crossed to the filing cabinet, and began pulling forms, thin sheets that made soft, papery sighs as he stacked them on the desk. We'll need a few signatures today, and then I'll finalize it this afternoon. You'll have the updated documents by tomorrow. I nodded, tracing the grain of the desk with one finger. The wood was smooth, worn by decades of decisions like this: marriages, divorces, inheritances, endings. When he returned to his chair, he placed a fresh document in front of me and turned it so I could read it. Trustee, Henry Adler. Beneficiary, Nora Hale. Contingency clause. In the event of contestation, assets will transfer to the designated charitable organizations. It was all so clean, so simple. Here, he said, sliding a pen toward me. Sign wherever I've marked. My hand hovered over the page. The ink shimmered faintly in the morning light, the paper cool beneath my palm. I thought about all the times I'd signed things in my life. School permission slips, mortgage checks, holiday cards, blank lines on forms Daniel said he'd handle later. But this time felt different. This time, my name wasn't a permission. It was a boundary. I signed each page slowly, the way you speak when you want to be understood. When it was done, Henry gathered the papers and pressed the metal clip shut. The sound was small but final, a click that seemed to echo longer than it should have. It's official, he said. You've made the changes. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Good, he smiled. You know, most people make decisions like this out of anger. You don't sound angry. I'm not, I said. I'm just done being useful to people who stopped seeing me. He studied me a moment longer, then nodded. That's not anger, Marjorie. That's wisdom. I smiled faintly. Maybe. Or maybe it's just late. He chuckled, closing the folder. Either way, you've earned it. When I stood to leave, he followed me to the door. Another small courtesy, another reminder that some people still know how to treat others with respect. At the doorway, he said quietly, You know, Nora's a lucky girl. I paused, hand on the handle. No, I said. I'm the lucky one. She's the only person who remembers who I am. Outside, the sky had cleared completely. The street glimmered where the rain had dried, the smell of wet concrete and lilacs from the florist mixing in the air. I walked past the flower shop where buckets of tulips leaned toward the sun and bought a single white one. The florist wrapped it in paper, tied it with twine. I carried it in one hand, the folder in the other, walking slower now. Not because I was tired, but because I wanted to remember what this felt like. The lightness after finally choosing yourself. When I reached the crosswalk, a gust of wind tugged at my coat, lifting the edge of the paper around the flower. The sun caught it for a moment, bright and soft, before it settled again. It wasn't victory I felt, not closure either. It was something quieter, deeper. The sound of balance returning to a life that had been tilted too long. And as I stepped off the curb, I thought, peace isn't a gift someone hands you. It's something you learn to sign for yourself. It started with a phone call on a Thursday morning, the kind that makes you pause whatever you're doing because the voice on the other end carries something genuine. "Grandma, it's me, Nora." Her tone was warm, unguarded, the way people sound when they aren't asking for anything. "I've been thinking about you. Can I come visit this weekend?" I looked out the window. The sky was pale, the kind of gray that usually makes the day feel longer than it is. "You don't have to, sweetheart," I said, already knowing I wanted her to. "I know," she said, "but I want to." It's been too long. She was right. It had been years since I'd seen her. The girl with her mother's eyes and her father's quiet way of overthinking everything. Last I'd heard, she was working at a clinic in Seattle, too busy helping other people to notice how far she'd drifted from family holidays. And now, here she was, offering something simple and rare, her time. "I'd love that," I said finally. "Take the early train. I'll pick you up." When Saturday came, the house smelled like cinnamon and soap. I'd baked a pie, not because I had to, but because I wanted her to have something warm when she arrived. The table was set with 2 plates, mismatched but clean, and a small vase of tulips from the yard. For once, the house didn't feel too big. It felt ready. The train station was quiet that afternoon. People came and went in small bursts, hugs, suitcases, quick goodbyes. I stood near the arrivals gate, hands tucked into my coat pockets. When I saw her, I knew instantly. Nora moved like her mother used to, fast but graceful, the kind of presence that lights up a room without meaning to. Her hair was tied back loosely, her backpack slung over one shoulder, and when her eyes met mine, she broke into the same smile she'd had when she was 10. "Grandma!" She ran the last few steps, and when she hugged me, it wasn't the polite kind of hug people give out of obligation. It was the real kind. Arms around, head tucked in, a heartbeat you can actually feel. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed that until it happened. "You look amazing," she said, stepping back to look at me. "Did you cut your hair?" I laughed. "No, it just decided to behave for once." We drove home with the windows cracked open, the wind carrying the smell of pine from the hills. Nora told me about her work. Long shifts, patients who remind her of people she's loved, how hard it can be to keep her heart open without breaking it. I listened, smiling, because somewhere in her voice I heard the strength of all the women who came before her. Her mother, her grandmother, maybe even me. That evening, we ate together at the kitchen table. Not a fancy meal, just roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and the pie cooling on the counter. She insisted on doing the dishes after, so I set up the chessboard in the living room, the same one her grandfather used to play on. When she came in, drying her hands on a towel, her face lit up. "You kept it." "Of course I did. He would have haunted me if I didn't." She laughed, took the opposite seat, and moved a pawn forward without hesitation. "You're going down, Grandma." Big words for someone who used to cry when she lost. Maybe I've learned from the best. We played for an hour, not seriously, just enough to talk between moves. She told me about the letter I'd sent months ago, the one she'd kept folded in her wallet. "When you wrote that you'd flown across the country for a table you were never meant to sit at," she said softly, "that hit me. I felt that way too, trying to fit somewhere that doesn't have room for you." I nodded, moving my bishop. "That's the thing about family, Nora. Sometimes you have to stop begging for a seat and build your own table." She looked at me for a long moment, then reached across the board and squeezed my hand. "I'm really glad you did." The clock ticked softly on the wall. Outside, the first stars were starting to appear through the kitchen window. The house, for once, didn't echo. It breathed. We ate the pie later, sitting side by side on the couch, our plates balanced on our knees. She told me about a man she was seeing, about how she wasn't sure if love and peace could ever exist in the same house. I told her maybe they could, if both people stopped trying to win. She laughed, leaning her head on my shoulder. "You always make things sound simple." "They usually are," I said. "It's people who complicate them." We sat there until the pie was gone, until the house grew quiet again. And in that small, perfect stillness, no pretense, no debt, no performance, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. For once, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt seen. The calls began on a Wednesday. At first, 1 or 2, Daniel's name flashing on the screen, then Clara's, then both again in quick succession. I didn't pick up. By the fifth ring, I just watched the phone buzz on the counter, the sound no longer sharp, just dull, like an insect knocking against a window it couldn't escape through. They left voicemails. I didn't listen. The tone was the same each time, anxious, polite, incomplete. "Mom, please call us back." "Marjorie, we're worried." "Can you just let us know you're okay?" Worried, not sorry. There's a difference. Because their worry wasn't about me, it was about the silence. The space where my yes used to be, the pause where I used to fix things before they broke. That silence, I realized, had power. It unsettled them. It made them see the shape of everything they'd taken for granted. And maybe that was the truest thing I'd ever given them, the weight of my absence. I turned the phone face down and went to the kitchen. The clock ticked softly, steady as my breathing. For once, there was no noise I needed to fill, no apology I needed to make, just the quiet hum of my own life. That afternoon, I pulled open the drawer where I kept my notebook, the same one that had held grocery lists and half-written thoughts for years. I flipped to a clean page and wrote slowly, carefully, the way you do when you know every word matters. Things I no longer owe, explanations. Second chances to people who waste first ones. Apologies for taking up space. The need to prove I'm worth keeping. A seat at a table that doesn't make room for me. I stopped for a moment, let my pen rest. The ink bled slightly into the paper, steady, final. Then I turned the page. Things I still have. My name. My peace. My home. The sound of my own breathing when I'm not waiting for someone to call. The voice of my granddaughter saying, "You sound stronger." I read the two lists twice, not to memorize them, but to feel the weight of what each meant. Then I tore the page gently along the spine, folded it once, and taped it to the inside of the cabinet door under the sink, the same place I kept the dish gloves and sponges. A quiet place. A real place. The phone buzzed again in the other room. I didn't move. I made a cup of tea instead, waited for the water to boil, listened to it hiss, then calm. The smell of steam and lemon filled the air. I carried the mug to the table, sat down, and stared at the empty chair across from me. There had been a time when that emptiness felt cruel, like something stolen. Now it just felt honest. I sipped the tea slowly, felt the warmth travel through me. Outside, a car passed, a dog barked. The world went on, as it always had, as it always would. And in that moment, I understood something simple. Their panic was never about losing me. It was about realizing they no longer controlled what I gave. When I finished my tea, I rinsed the cup and left it to dry by the sink. The house was still. Not lonely, not empty, just mine. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. The knock came just after sunset. I knew it was her before I opened the door. The rhythm was careful, measured, like someone trying to sound calm while their heart was racing. Through the window, I could see her car idling at the curb, headlights still on. She'd come straight from somewhere she didn't belong, hoping to reclaim control she no longer had. When I opened the door, she was standing there in a pressed beige coat and heels, far too thin for the cold. Her hair was perfect. Her voice rehearsed. "Marjorie," she said softly, "I hope this isn't a bad time." "It usually is," I said, stepping aside. "But you might as well come in." Clara hesitated for half a beat, then entered like someone walking into a courtroom, not a home. Her eyes swept the living room, landing briefly on the poinsettia by the window, the chessboard on the table, the half-finished cup of tea beside my chair. "Everything looks the same," she said, smiling too tightly. "Things only change when you're here," I replied. Her smile faltered. She set her purse down, still standing. "Daniel's been worried." "We both have. You haven't been answering our calls." "I know," I said evenly. "That's why you're here." She blinked. "Yes, well, we just wanted to make sure you're all right. What happened at Thanksgiving was a misunderstanding." I met her gaze, unflinching. "No, Clara. It was a decision. You just don't like that I finally made one of my own." She exhaled, the performance slipping a little. "Daniel thought your flight was the next day." "We got the times mixed up," I interrupted gently. "And the photo? The one you posted? Full house, full hearts?" Her jaw tightened. "That was just a post. I didn't mean anything by it. But you did, I said. You meant to show the world you had everything you needed. Clara's lips pressed together. She shifted her weight, crossing her arms. This isn't fair, Marjorie. Daniel loves you. We both do. He's just been busy, and you've been distant. I've been quiet, I corrected. There's a difference. She sighed, frustration creeping through her tone. You're pushing us away for no reason. No, I said calmly. I'm just not pulling anymore. For a moment, she looked genuinely lost. What do you mean? I said, you came here to see if I'm still useful, if there's still a check to clear, a safety net to fall on. Not to see me, her face hardened. That's not true. It's not false either, I said, voice level. Every visit has had a purpose, every call a request. This one's no different. She swallowed, her hands fidgeting with her purse strap. You've changed. I've stopped pretending, I said. That's all. She stepped closer, lowering her voice as if gentleness might fix it. Daniel's worried about you. He said you canceled the transfers, revoked his authorization. I did. Why? He didn't do anything wrong. I tilted my head. Exactly. He didn't do anything. Clara blinked, stunned by the precision of the words. Silence stretched between us, heavy but clean. You can't just cut your family off like this, she said finally. I'm not cutting anyone off, I said. I'm just closing a door that's been open too long on one side. Her eyes glistened. He'll be devastated. I picked up my cup of tea, now cool. He should be. Not because I'm gone, but because I'm not coming back. That one landed. She stood there, breathing unevenly, the color rising in her cheeks. Then she straightened, smoothing her coat again. I came here hoping we could fix this. There's nothing to fix, I said quietly. I'm not angry, Clara. I'm simply finished. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she nodded stiffly, picked up her purse, and walked to the door. At the threshold, she paused. You know, Daniel doesn't understand why you're doing this. I nodded. Then it's time he starts learning to understand things without me explaining them. She lingered for half a second, maybe waiting for softness that wasn't coming. When she saw it wasn't, she stepped outside. The cold air rushed in, sharp and honest, before the door closed behind her. I stood there, hand on the doorknob, listening to the sound of her car fading down the street. The quiet that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like clarity, the kind that comes when you finally stop mistaking endurance for love. I walked back to the kitchen, poured the rest of my tea into the sink, and whispered to the empty room. I'm not angry. I'm simply finished. Then I rinsed the cup, set it upside down on the rack, and turned off the light. The morning air was clear and bright, the kind of crisp light that makes everything look cleaner than it really is. Marjorie stepped out of the house just after 9, her purse tucked under her arm, a manila folder held close to her chest. Inside were the documents she'd spent the past few weeks preparing. Her will, the trust, and the letter she'd rewritten 3 times until it finally sounded like peace. The notary's office was small and tidy, tucked between a florist and a dry cleaner on Elm Street. The glass door jingled as she pushed it open. Behind the counter sat Omar Patel, a kind-faced man in his 50s with rimless glasses and a calm voice that seemed to make people tell the truth without realizing it. Good morning, Mrs. Langford, he said, standing as she approached. Right on time. I try to be, she replied, smiling faintly. He gestured toward the desk. You brought the documents? She nodded, handing him the folder. He opened it carefully, scanning the first few pages. This is all in order. The living trust, the beneficiary declaration, and your statement of intent. You've even included a letter. Very thorough. I wanted there to be no confusion, she said. I've had enough of that lately. He chuckled softly. Clarity is a gift most people give too late. Marjorie sat, folding her hands on the table. Then I suppose I'm right on time. Omar nodded approvingly. Let's begin. The room was quiet except for the soft scratch of pens and the shuffle of paper. He read each section aloud, pausing only to ask if she wanted to make any changes. She didn't. Every signature she placed was deliberate, each letter a small act of closure. When they reached the final page, he looked up. And this, the trust distribution. You're certain about this? Yes, she said without hesitation. Everything goes to Nora Hale. The rest, whatever's left, to charity. I've already specified which ones." He studied her for a moment, then smiled. "You seem sure." "I am. She's the only one who still sees me as a person, not a purse." He signed his name below hers, then stamped the page. The sound of the seal pressing down, firm, final, felt like a heartbeat slowing to rest. "All done," he said, sliding the papers back into the folder. "Would you like me to mail the certified copies to your attorney?" "Yes, please," she said, rising to her feet. "And thank you, Mr. Patel." "My pleasure," he said kindly. "You're doing something good, you know, setting things in order before someone else decides for you." She nodded, adjusting her coat. "I've learned that if you don't draw your own lines, people will draw them for you, and they rarely put you inside." He smiled at that, the kind of smile that said he understood more than he let on. "Take care, Mrs. Langford." "You too," she said and left. Outside, the florist next door had set out a display of lilacs, soft purple blooms, full and fragrant. Marjorie paused, drawn by the scent. She bought 2 bundles, paying in cash, and carried them home cradled in her arms like something fragile and alive. When she walked into the house, the sunlight was spilling across the kitchen floor. She filled a tall glass vase with water and arranged the lilacs on the table. Their scent filled the room, clean, light, almost sweet. For a long moment, she just stood there looking at them. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. The papers were signed, the lines drawn, the story reordered. She touched one of the lilac stems gently, adjusting it so it leaned just right. The petals brushed against her fingers, soft and cool. "This is what peace looks like," she murmured. Then she sat down, poured herself a cup of tea, and watched the light move slowly across the table. The flowers catching it, bending it, softening it, until everything in the room seemed to glow. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of quiet day when the sun sits high but soft, when even the clock seems to tick slower than usual. Marjorie was in the garden trimming the lilacs that had begun to fade when the phone rang inside. She almost didn't go in. These days, silence had become her favorite sound, but something in the back of her mind, maybe old habit, maybe curiosity, made her wipe her hands on her apron and pick up the receiver. "Mom," his voice. Older now, but still trying to sound like the boy who used to call her from college when he needed help paying for books. Calm, polite, careful, the tone of someone who knows he's already in the wrong but hopes words might still rearrange the truth. "I heard about the trust," Daniel said after a pause. "Clara told me. She said you've changed things." Marjorie sat down at the kitchen table, the vase of lilacs between them even through the phone line. "I have," she said simply. There was a long silence. Then came the sound of him sighing, almost rehearsed. "You didn't even talk to me about it." "I didn't need to," she replied. "It wasn't a discussion." "Mom," he said, the word thinner this time, "we're still your family." She took a breath, steady, unhurried. "No, Daniel. I was your family. You haven't been mine in a long time." The line went quiet. Not the stunned kind of silence, the heavy kind. The kind that tells you someone finally heard what they never wanted to believe. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "That's not fair." Marjorie's tone didn't change. Neither was Thanksgiving. He didn't argue, not really. Just the sound of his breath again, shaky this time. "You could have told me how you felt." "I did," she said. "For years. You just called it complaining." "I didn't mean—" "I know you didn't," she said, cutting gently across his words. "That's the problem. You never mean to hurt anyone. You just do it when it's convenient." "Mom, please," he whispered. "Don't do this." "I already have." He exhaled hard, and for a brief second she thought she heard him swallow back something close to guilt, or maybe just fear. "You really want to cut us off like this?" "No," she said, calm as a still lake. "I just stopped holding on to people who keep letting go." The silence stretched again. He was searching for footing, but the ground had shifted too far beneath him. Finally, he said, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," she replied. "You just have to live with what's already been said." Another pause, then quieter. "Clara said you're angry." Marjorie almost smiled. "No, I'm not angry. I'm finished." He didn't respond right away. Then quietly, "Will I ever see you again?" "You might," she said, "but it'll have to be because you want to, not because you need to." He was silent again, and for the first time, it sounded like he was actually thinking, not planning what to say next, not defending himself, just sitting with it. Finally, he said, "I'll call you next week." "If you do," she said, "make sure it's not out of guilt." He gave a short, uneven laugh, the kind that comes from someone realizing they've run out of ways to argue. "You sound different." "I am," she said simply. "That's what happens when you stop waiting for permission to live." There was another pause, a long, fragile quiet that stretched like glass between them. Then he whispered, "I love you, Mom." She nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "I know," she said. "I hope one day you learn what that means." And then she ended the call. She didn't slam the phone down or take a deep breath after. She just sat there, the late afternoon light slipping across the table, touching the lilacs, her hands, the cooling cup of tea beside her. The house didn't echo anymore. It simply was. And for the first time in her life, Marjorie didn't feel like someone's mother or someone's caretaker or someone's safety net. She just felt like herself, whole, unapologetic, at peace. The package wasn't big, just a small brown box wrapped neatly with twine, the kind of simple wrapping that spoke more of care than ceremony. Inside, tucked between layers of soft tissue, was a pair of silver earrings and a folded envelope. Marjorie had packed it herself the night before, sitting at the kitchen table where the lilacs were now just beginning to fade. The earrings were old, polished, delicate, the same pair her husband had given her on their 25th anniversary. She'd worn them every year since, until recently. The trust papers lay beneath them, folded and stamped, along with a short handwritten note on thick cream paper. Her handwriting was steady, the ink a deep blue. "These are yours, not because you asked, but because you showed up. Not because of blood, but because of kindness. You reminded me what love looks like when it asks for nothing back." She sealed the note, slid it into the envelope, and tied the twine into a small, perfect knot. The next morning, she mailed the box to Nora's address in Seattle. No return label, no flourish. Just her name written cleanly in the corner. When the package arrived 2 days later, Nora found it waiting on her porch after work. She carried it inside, sat on the floor by the window, and opened it slowly. The light from the late afternoon sun caught the silver just right, a soft gleam, like something remembered. She read the note twice. The first time, she smiled. The second, her eyes filled. The phone rang a few minutes later, not out of panic, but gratitude. "Grandma?" Her voice trembled, but not from sadness. "You didn't have to send me this." "I know," Marjorie said. "That's why I did." For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was the kind of silence that doesn't sit heavy, the kind that breathes, the kind that fills the space between two hearts that finally understand each other. Nora laughed through the tears. "I'm wearing them right now." "I hope they make you feel strong," Marjorie said. "They do," Nora replied softly, "and loved." There was a pause, then a sigh. Gentle, content. "You know," Nora said, "I was scared for you at first. Thought maybe you were cutting everyone off." Marjorie smiled faintly, her gaze drifting to the vase on the table where fresh lilacs had replaced the old ones. "No, sweetheart. I just stopped giving to people who never looked back." "Thank you," Nora whispered, "for trusting me." "You earned it," Marjorie said, "not by asking, just by showing up." The two women sat there on opposite ends of the line, the distance between them softened by the sound of shared breathing, the hum of quiet understanding. No apologies, no explanations, no promises, just presence. Nora spoke again, barely above a whisper. "I love you, Grandma." Marjorie closed her eyes, smiling. "I know, and that's enough." When the call ended, she didn't feel the usual ache that follows goodbyes. She felt something lighter, like a circle quietly closing. She set the phone down, turned toward the window, and watched the evening light touch the lilacs once more. The house was quiet. The air smelled of tea and flowers. For the first time, her world felt both full and free, exactly as it should be. The first snow of the season came quietly just after dusk. Flakes drifted past the window in slow spirals, catching the porch light as they fell. Soft, silent, certain. Inside, the house was warm. The fireplace crackled low, steady, a small rhythm against the hush of the world outside. Marjorie sat at the kitchen table, her favorite cardigan wrapped around her shoulders. The same table that had once been too big, too empty, now felt exactly right. No crowd, no performance, just her. On the table in front of her sat a single slice of pie on a white plate. Pumpkin, still fragrant from the oven. A candle flickered beside it, its reflection trembling across the polished wood. For the first time in years, there were no carving knives, no second helpings, no polite laughter stretched thin over discomfort. Just her pie, and the clearest thing she'd ever tasted. Not bitterness, but freedom. She ate slowly, savoring every bite. The crust was crisp, the filling smooth, a little uneven the way homemade things often are. When she finished, she didn't rush to clear the plate. She just sat there, hands folded around her mug of tea, watching the candle flame lean and sway in the draft. The quiet was complete, not heavy, not sad. It was the kind of quiet that lives only in houses that have finally stopped apologizing for being empty. For a moment, she thought about all the Thanksgivings before. The noise, the chaos, the endless effort to make everything perfect for people who never noticed the work. Then she thought about this one and how still it was. How honest. She realized she didn't miss the noise. What she'd missed, all those years, was herself. The clock in the hallway chimed softly. 1, then 2, then silence again. She smiled. There would be no photographs from this Thanksgiving, no captions about full houses or full hearts, just a small truth that didn't need to be posted anywhere. Peace isn't something people give you. It's something you finally stop giving away. Marjorie leaned back, feeling the warmth of the fire on her skin. Outside, the snow was falling thicker now, blanketing the street, the trees, the world. She took one last sip of tea and whispered to no one in particular, or maybe to everyone who had ever needed to hear it. Your silence has value. Your seat is your own, and you don't need permission to keep it. The flame flickered once, then steadied. She smiled, closed her eyes, and let the house breathe with her, quiet, full, and finally free.